So that's about the DNS server. So let's talk about another. Let's try to answer another question about how the internet works. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there are so many servers on the online. Each we have more than 3 billion domains, and these domains are hosted on all types of servers. The two most common operating systems used right now are Windows and Linux. Okay. Linux is an operating system just like Windows, if you don't know Linux, right? So how do these different operating systems and how do these different web servers communicate with each other, right? To answer that, we need to think of us. If you are hired by this big multinational company, and they want to send you on a business trip to Japan or China or the Middle East or something like that. These guys, they have different customs, different cultures. They speak different languages. They have different ways to show respect to them. They have different ways to communicate, and so on and so forth. So, if you are doing a significant business deal in the Middle East or Japan or China, then your company is going to teach you something called the protocol of how to communicate in the culture you are going to, right? A protocol, in generally speaking, it's not related to IT or the internet. A protocol is an agreed upon procedure or agreed upon process to communicate between each other. So, for example, this is my classroom. So I have a protocol in my classroom that all of us respect each other. If you have a question, you need to raise your hand and I will respond, and then you lower your hand. Okay. This is called a protocol. Okay. So a protocol is a way or a process that is used to organize communication between different parties who will not be able to communicate in other ways. Okay. So this is a protocol in general. The internet work depends on protocols because the people using the internet are different, the applications on the internet are different, and the operating systems on the internet are different. Okay, so we will talk about the protocol that controls the internet, or the protocol that is used on the internet. Okay. Again, I will try to be as non-technical as possible, but sometimes we will get a little bit technical. So if you feel that you have questions or something is not clear, feel free to ask. Okay. Mm. Okay. So all networks in the world, including the internet, work using a protocol called TCP/IP protocol. Okay, so the protocol that is used for communication between peers or between computers on the internet is called the TCP/IP protocol, transfer protocol, internet protocol. Okay, transfer control protocol, IP protocol, but it's everyone knows it as TCP/IP. This is how everyone knows it by. Okay. So what happens is that if you want to communicate with a server or with another computer using the internet or using any network, that doesn't just apply to the internet, that applies to any network, including the CSUMB network, including your home network that you are on right now. Okay, right? So what happens is you have some data that you want to send over to the server, and you want the server to send you back response with more data, right? We use this protocol. We put our data into a TCP/IP protocol packet. I will talk about that later, and send it over the internet. And once it reaches the other side, because this protocol is common between the two sides, the server will be able to understand your message, understand your data, and provide you with the appropriate response. Okay, so the key is having one common protocol that governs sending and receiving information on the internet. Okay. The IP address we talked about, the IP address or the address of your computer on the internet is part of this protocol. Okay. Right. Now, the TCP/IP protocol has 7 layers. 7 layers mean 7 components that work together to deliver a message from one end of the internet to the other. Okay, so a layer here means component. Okay, starting from the very bottom, we have a layer called the physical layer. Physical is the layer responsible for the wiring system. Okay, so this is the physical layer. Physical means the actual physical connections between the computers. Okay, so what kind of cables we are using, how are the electrons being sent from one place to the other. Okay, this is called the physical layer. It has some specs to govern what kind of cables to use and how the physical electrons move from one place to the other. It has its own specs there. Okay, this is more related to communication engineering, and we don't need to talk about that. The other layer is called the data link layer. Okay, the data link layer focuses on transferring data or moving messages and data inside the same local network. Okay, so for example, inside your home network, if you are working from home, or inside CSUMB network, this layer is responsible for moving data inside the local network. Local area network means your LAN or your Wi-Fi network. Okay, so if you are inside CSUMB, then CSUMB is your local area network. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about data link because there is something important that I want you to know about that. We'll talk more about that later on. The third layer, which is the internet layer. The internet layer is the layer that has the IP address, okay? And it is responsible for routing data or moving data across networks. So this is the layer responsible for communicating over the internet. Okay, so this is the internet layer. This is the one that contains the IP address, and this is the layer responsible for exchanging communication between networks, so over the internet, basically. Right? Then we have the transport layer. The transport layer, or TCP layer, is a layer that is responsible for transferring data between applications. So if you are using your email client and someone else is using another email client on the other end of the world, the TCP layer or the transport layer is responsible for managing the data from your computer, from your from your email client to the other email client. Okay, and then at the top layer is the application layer. The application layer is the actual applications we use on the internet, like the web. Web is an application, email is an application, FTP, transferring files, is an application, video on demand is an application, and so on. Okay, so these are the different layers that form the TCP protocol, TCP/IP protocol. Okay, each of these layers has its own specs, its own standards. Okay, so and each computer has these layers built in. So if you want to send an email, then you are going to use an application, an email client, and the TCP layer or transport layer will transfer your actual email to the other side, to the other application, using these lower layers. Okay, right? So let's see how it works. Right? Okay. Right. Okay. Each LAN, each network, like CSUMB, as I said, has a gateway, usually a router at the edge of the network that connects it to the internet. Okay, so if you want to communicate with external websites or external networks, your data needs to go through this gateway or through this server, through this router to the external website. Okay, right. Right. So this is the TCP protocol in a nutshell. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the protocol and get to know it a little bit better. Okay. All right. All right. All right. As I mentioned, I'm trying to get as untechnical as I can. So, okay. 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 So we talked about the internet layer. We said this is the layer responsible for communicating across networks. We'll talk about another important layer, an essential layer, which is the transport layer, this layer. Okay. Now, the transport layer is used for multiple purposes. The first thing is it establishes connections between the two ends, right? So if you want to communicate with the server, it creates a channel or creates a connection between your computer and the server you are connecting to, right? This is very similar like making a phone call. When you raise the phone and start making a call to the other side, this establishment of the call between you and the other side happens here as well. Okay. The TCP layer then packages your data in something called packet. Okay, so your data is going to be stored in something called a packet, and this packet will be sent over to the other side of the other side you are communicating with. Okay, if there is an error in communication, if you are sending your packet and something happens in the communication, one of your packets dropped, your data was lost. Um, the internet was very slow, so there was a big delay in sending your data to the server. Then the TCP layer is responsible for identifying this error. So if an error happens in transferring the data, the TCP layer is responsible for identifying this error and solving it. Okay, so that happens in the TCP layer as well.